do you think happened? Right. All right, we'll be starting in just a moment. Okay, here we go. Ready? Very cool. Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Derrick Pitts, Chief Astronomer at the Franklin Institute Science Museum, your cool astronomer, with the July edition of Night Skies at Home. Night Skies is at Home is our regular monthly astronomy program that's really an outgrowth, an offshoot of the astronomy program we've run at the Franklin Institute for many years now called Night Skies at the Observatory. Night Skies at the Observatory is our program in which we invite our visitors to come down and visit at the Franklin Institute at night when we can bring to bear all of our astronomy resources. The observatory on the fourth floor, the planetarium, all of our activities that we can bring out, as well as telescopes on the fifth floor roof deck, so we can give you an opportunity to see the sky from downtown Center City, Philadelphia. You'd be surprised at how much you actually can see, and this is all in an effort to give you an opportunity to familiarize yourself with the night sky and see what's available to be seen from Center City, Philadelphia. As I said, there's quite a bit you can see. You might imagine that the skies would be not quite the best in an urban area like right downtown in Philadelphia or any other city. And you're right, of course, skies can be better if you're out away from a downtown urban area where there's plenty of night light. But just the same, you can still see quite a bit. And that's what we're going to include in our program tonight. All of those things that you can see from an urban area, as well as areas that are further out from city lights. So again, I'm Derrick Pitts, Chief Astronomer at the Franklin Institute Science Museum. Welcome aboard to Night Skies at the Observatory, Night Skies at Home, our online version for July 2021. We're going to take a few minutes just to let everybody else join up with our program this evening. And while that's taking place, let me just remind you that we are looking for your questions. We'd love to have your questions this evening. So if you have anything connected to astronomy or space exploration, please feel free to throw that question into the chat box, into our comments box. And our technical director, Katie, will grab hold of those and she'll send them over to my studio director, Linda, who's sitting over here. Say hi, Linda.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Linda's here, and Linda's going to pick up those questions from Katie. She'll send them on over to me, and we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can. So, whatever your question is about astronomy or space science, please bring it on for us tonight. We'll see what we can do with it. And if we don't get to all the questions tonight, I will answer them in about 24 hours. I'll go through the list that's still left and answer whatever your questions are. So please don't hesitate to ask us anything. Send us interesting questions, whatever it is that you've been curious about in astronomy and space exploration. We'd love to have your questions. So we want you to participate in this program, and that's a way in which you can participate. Send us your comments. We can do those too. And we'd also love to hear where you are getting this program. If you're watching this program, wherever you are in the Philadelphia area, the tri-state area, anywhere outside, we'd love to find out where you are enjoying this program from. Often we have questions about what can be seen where you are, and we can talk about that as well. Sometimes where you are, the sky might be slightly different or different enough that it's worth taking note of. And so we can do that. And that can be a very, very interesting thing. So please let us know where you're enjoying this program from. Again, send us your questions. And we're going to get started with our program tonight. We have a little bit to do, quite a bit to do. Our program tonight really is focused on this being the perfect month for casual sky gazers to get a grip on following the planets around the sky and understanding the flow of the sky through the year. What I mean by that is there are planets in the evening sky that we can catch early in the evening just after sunset, other planets that we can see a little bit later in the evening, but because they're rising later, that's going to give us an opportunity to track them over the next several months. And we can see how their position changes in the evening sky if we just do a regular weekly observation. And that way you'll begin to get an understanding of how planets move around the sky. I got to tell you, once you get a hold of that motion, learn the patterns of how planets appear in the evening sky, you won't forget it actually. It sticks with you. And so that makes it easy for you to recognize planets in the evening sky. It's not complicated. You don't need equipment for this. You can do it with a pair of binoculars. If you have binoculars, that's great. But you don't even need binoculars for this. So this is a great way to connect with the sky and learn about how the sky flows. It's also a great time to learn what constellations are available in the summer sky, because it's a perfect time to be outside. Temperature's nice and warm. It's nice to be out in the summer. And so it's a great opportunity to learn that too. So we're going to learn about what's up in the summer sky. That's what we're going to do this month tonight. We'll learn about some satellites as well that'll be visible for you, and places where you can find the information that you need to track all this stuff. Again, your questions about astronomy are welcome. All right, folks, let's get started with our sky phenomenon. That's usually how we start our program. We talk about what's happening in the sky right now in the sense of what's going on with sunrise, sunset, where's the moon, those obvious things like that. And so here we are, July 1st. Welcome to July, everybody. So in July, we have some pretty special stuff going on. But let's start out, first of all, with sunrise and sunset. Right now, sunrise is at 5:36 a.m. That's awfully early. That means that the sky begins to brighten up about half an hour to 40 minutes beforehand. So we're talking about 4:45 in the morning when we see the first light of the sun as sunrise is coming for us. Sunset is in the evening at 8:33 p.m. Now, at this time of the year, right now, this week, last week, and a little bit of next week, sunrises seem to sit at the same time for quite a bit of time, for that period of time, actually. It's about 2 weeks spread over this time from the end of June into the beginning of July. We'll talk about the reasons why that is in just a moment. But I just wanted to touch on one other thing about sunrise and about sunset. It's an interesting way to look at those phenomena, ways to think about it that will help to get your mind out into the solar system. And it is that as we think about sunrise and sunset, actually, these are two words that we have coined, that we've created, that sort of match what the phenomenon is that we see when this happens. In the morning, we see the sun come up above the horizon. In the evening, we see the sun set below the horizon in the west. Well, actually, what's happening is the Earth is rotating on its axis towards the sun. So if you think about it, the Earth rotates, if you think about the directions on Earth, the Earth rotates from west to east. The Earth rotates from west to east. What this does is, in the morning, it turns this portion of the planet towards the sun. And as we turn towards the sun, it seems as if the sun is rising. It gets higher in the sky, it passes across the sky during the day, and then sets in the west. When actually it's the Earth turning towards the sun during the first part of the day. We see the sun in the middle of the sky in the middle of the day. And then for the rest of the day, the Earth is turning away from the sun. This portion of the Earth is turning away from the sun. So we see the sun setting over on the western side of the sky. So that's what's really happening, is that phenomenon. So in the morning, if you happen to be out 45 minutes before sunrise, you see the first rays of dawn coming over in the east, a time we call morning twilight. The Earth is turning towards the sun. We begin to see the light as the Earth turns towards the sun. And then the sun takes center stage as it comes up above the horizon. And then we have sunrise. And there we go for the day. So right now at this time of the year, we have this very, very early morning sunrise, and we have the late sunsets. Now, because of that, we have the greatest number of hours of daylight for the course of the year. So when we're right at the summer solstice, that point in the Earth's orbit around the sun, where the Earth's tilt toward the sun is the greatest, well, at that point, we have just about 15 hours of daylight here in Philadelphia. 15 hours of daylight here in Philadelphia. Now, as you go up and down the planet, that changes. So, for example, just last week, I was in northern New York, a little bit further north of Philadelphia, about 400 miles north. And just that distance alone was enough to extend the length of day. So while sunset was happening here in Philadelphia at 8:33 in the evening, up there, sunset was happening at 10 minutes of 9, p.m. So there's a few more minutes of daylight in that portion of the planet. Now, if I were to keep creeping further north, I'd get up toward the Arctic Circle. And inside the Arctic Circle in the summer, that's when we have the famed midnight sun, 24 hours of daylight, no darkness at all, because the sun's above the horizon all the time. But that's only for a short period of time in the summer, and that's where that happens at that portion of the planet. Now, if we come back down toward the equator, another very interesting phenomenon happens. And that interesting phenomenon is that when you get down towards the equator, it doesn't matter what season of the year it is, everything's the same. You have 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness. The sun rises at around 6 o'clock in the morning, sets at 6 o'clock in the evening. You don't have the long sunsets that we have up here at 40 degrees north latitude. But on the other side of the coin, in what would be winter time, the winter months, well, they don't have the long nights either around the equator. And that's all because of where we are positioned on the planet and the path that we see the sun makes across the sky. So if you've ever wondered about that, well, that's what's happening with that. Okay, great. So sunrise and sunset. Well, at this time of year, as I said, this is a very special time. It turns out that Monday, July 5th, just a couple of days from now, we also have this other interesting thing that happens. The Earth reaches a point in its orbit around the sun when the Earth is at its greatest distance from the sun. Monday, the 5th of July, we're at our greatest distance from the sun. It's at 6:28 in the evening, 6:28 in the evening. And at that point, the Earth will be 94,510,700 miles away from the sun. 94,500,000 miles away from the sun. Now, if you want to compare that to when Earth is closest to the sun, well, first of all, that happens in January. So our next closest approach to the sun is going to be on January 4th of next year, January 4th. And at that point, the Earth will be 91,406,000 miles away from the sun. Wow, 91 million in January, 94 million in July. Wouldn't you think it would be the other way around for the temperature changes that we see? Well, it's not about proximity of the planet to the sun. It's really about the tilt of the Earth that causes the changes that we see in our temperatures during the course of the year. So for us here on the northern half of the planet, in the summer, even though we're at the greatest distance from the sun, the tilt of the Earth's rotational axis gives us the direct rays from the sun, and that heats the Earth for us in the northern hemisphere and gives us summer. It's turning out to be quite a warm summer here in North America this summer. It's another combination of factors that are accelerating the heating, but that's the reason why we have this warmth that we have at this time of year. So again, we're at our most distant point from the sun coming up on Monday. That day, by the way, is called aphelion. Aphelion. These are Greek terms meaning distant from the sun. And of course, on the other end of the year, in January, when we're close to the sun, it's called perihelion. Perihelion, again from the Greek, meaning when we're closest to the sun. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's kind of different. It also causes some other really interesting effects that I mentioned just a moment ago. Turns out like this. Well, last week, sunrises began coming later already. So sunrises have already started coming later. We're at this period of time, as I mentioned, where we're just hanging around the 8:33 sunset time, and that's going to continue for another week or so. But guess what? That's going to start to change in about another week when sunsets start to come earlier. You might be thinking, hey, summer just started. How is it that sunsets are starting to come earlier already? Well, we really don't notice it because it creeps along very slowly as the sunsets start to come earlier. But by August, you really notice that we're no longer doing sunsets at 8:30 in the evening, but closer to 8 o'clock. So you'll really begin to feel it then. But this means that you really have to get out and enjoy these long, warm evenings of summertime right now. Don't waste time. Get out and enjoy it while we can have these long hours of daylight in the summer. You know what's going to happen in December. We're going to say, I can't wait until summer comes back again. So enjoy it while you can right now. Okay, so don't forget, we're looking for your questions. We're going to ask for those in a moment. The moon is at last quarter today. Yes, it's at last quarter today. The next new moon comes on July the 9th. Full moon following that will be on July the 23rd. And the moon is rising now. It actually rises early tomorrow morning, early Friday morning, 1:13 a.m. The moon rises, and then it sets at 1:53 p.m. in the afternoon. This means that if you wanted to look for the moon during the day, you actually can. If you look in the sky tomorrow morning around 10 o'clock, 9 to 11 o'clock, you'll find the moon high in the western sky. And you can actually see it during the day. So that's a pretty cool thing to see. So there's lots of great stuff in the sky, as I mentioned earlier. But let's just stop here for a moment and see if we have any questions from anybody in our audience. Linda, do we have any questions yet?
We have lots of questions.
Hey, great. Lots of questions I hear. Go ahead.
Gloria Amador says hello, and she would like to know if you continue the online virtual astronomy learning because she wants her children.
Hey, Gloria, thanks for joining us tonight. I understand you're wondering if we're going to continue our virtual astronomy programming once the museum opens up again and we start our night skies programs back at the observatory. Yeah, we're going to continue these for a while. So we'll be here talking about all kinds of really cool stuff. I understand you want your kids to be able to jump in on this and pick up some stuff. Sure, bring them aboard and make sure they have questions too. We'd love to hear what their questions are, Gloria. So thanks for joining us tonight. We'll be around doing this for a little while longer. And you know what? Hey, guess what? If you have ideas for content you'd like to learn about, send me a note. I'd be happy to hear what you're interested in finding about in astronomy and space science. So drop us a line and let us know. Thanks, Gloria.
Shout out. We got people listening from Sacramento, South Philly, Jersey, Illinois.
Wow. Hey, all you folks out there on the West Coast in Sacramento, thanks for joining us tonight. Folks from Illinois, thanks for joining us tonight. And guess what? We have people from as far away as South Philadelphia. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're glad to have you aboard. Anybody else out there listening from some distance, please let us know. So for the folks in Illinois and in Sacramento, guess what? The skies we're going to talk about tonight and the planetary positions will work for you too. So as long as we're in the same latitude band, generally speaking, the same latitude band, well, that's cool because if we're in the same latitude band, we're going to see the same stars and the same planets for the most part. It's when we get away from that in the, I'm sorry, if you're in this, when we get away from that in, hold on, if we start going further north and further south of latitude, so if we start going up toward the North Pole, if we're heading down toward the equator, that's when things between start to change. As I said, if we're in the same latitude band, that's cool. But once your latitude starts to change significantly, then other things begin to open up for you. So if you're listening from Florida, let's say, you'll be able to see most of everything that we see here in this latitude band, but you'll be picking up more objects from the southern sky that we can't see here. And if you live much further north, you'll pick up objects further in the northern sky and lose the southern sky. So don't worry, we can carry everything and we can make sure everybody understands what they can see. What else is next, Linda?
C. Young Lee would like to know what planets can be seen from Earth without tubes.
C. Young Lee, thanks for joining us tonight. You want to know what planets can be seen in the sky without any kind of optical aid, without tools. And I think you're talking about without binoculars or a telescope. Well, we all have these one power telescopes. See these guys right in here? These are our one power telescopes. Believe it or not, they allow us to see a lot. So here's what you can see. It's all the major planets of the solar system, really, that are not too far away. So let's start out with the easiest ones first. That would be Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, and finally Mercury. So there are actually 5 planets that we can see. Now I'm going to come back up in order because you really have to make sure you understand clearly about these. Let's go with Mercury first. It's the one that's closest to the sun. It's the smallest planet of this group that I've mentioned. And as it turns out, you can see Mercury without optical aid. It's just really tough. It's a real challenge to catch Mercury, but you can do it. The trick about it is, though, that Mercury doesn't orbit very far from the sun. So you have to catch Mercury at particular points in its orbit around the sun when it's at its greatest distance away from the sun, either on the eastern side of the sun or the western side of the sun. So you're going to be doing this viewing at sunset or in the morning before sunrise. And there are other challenges about it that you can learn to overcome that'll make it possible for you to see Mercury, but that's the most challenging one. Now, if we come back up from there, Mars is next. Mars is a little bit more of a challenge because at its greatest distances from Earth, it Its brightness isn't as high as the other three planets are that are left, but its color gives it away. And we'll have an example of that for you tonight that you'll be able to sort of take a look at and see how that works out for you. The last three we have are Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus in that order of brightness ascending. So Saturn is the next one in brightness. It's easy to recognize. It's not as bright as the other two, but it stands out easily in the evening sky. Even though you can't see the rings without binoculars, you can still see Saturn without too much of a challenge. Jupiter, of course, the biggest planet of our solar system, stands out, easy to see, looks like a bright star, very much like Saturn looks like a bright star. Jupiter just looks like a brighter star. And you need to know where to look so you can make sure you're seeing the right ones. We'll go over that tonight. And finally, Venus. Wow. Venus gleams like a shining beacon in the night sky at the right time of its orbit. But anytime it's in the evening sky, it's incredibly bright, and you could recognize it without any difficulty at all. Now, color also helps in this, and you'll find that Venus is a bright, clear white, so that helps to distinguish it. Jupiter has a creamy color, so that's a little bit off-white. Saturn has a little bit of yellow in it, so that's another distinction that allows you to see that. Of course, Mars we know as having this rosy color on the surface, and Mercury looks just like a bright point of light and very, very small. That's why it's such a big challenge. So that's what you can see without binoculars or a telescope. If you do have binoculars, though, they will greatly enhance your view. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute about what's out there to see. What's next, Linda?
Okay, Tracy would like to know, are there any nights planetary with kids can come with big telescopes?
Hey, Tracy, thanks for joining us tonight. You're wondering if there are any nights at the Franklin Institute where you can come and bring your kids to look through the telescope. Yeah, that program is the in-house version of this one. That's Night Skies at the Observatory. We've been doing that for a long time at Franklin Institute. That program hasn't restarted yet, but I'll be sure to let you know when that program does get underway again, so you can come down to the Franklin Institute, bring your family, and check out what's available to be seen through our telescopes. Our telescopes are big enough that they work well enough in urban areas under urban lighting conditions that we can see quite a bit. So I encourage you, as soon as I start to announce when that is, to come down and join us in person and take a look through our telescopes. Thanks for that. Appreciate that, Tracy. Okay, great. So that's it for questions. We'll come back for more questions later. So let's move on now because we want to talk about what's out there in the evening sky. I said that this is the perfect month to get started, sort of learning the flow of the night sky, sort of tracking your way around the sky. And I'd like to start with planets because, as it turns out, planets are the first objects that are the easiest ones to see in the evening sky. So we're going to start with those just to get you familiar with those. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the planets Venus and Mars. Now, the first thing we have to do in order to get you in the proper orientation for viewing any objects in the evening sky is just get you set up for how to observe the sky. And so here's how we'll do that. I'm going to go to a star map in a moment. Here's what I want you to think about where you live. Think about where the sun rises and where the sun sets, where you live. Think about that for a moment. Just imagine in your mind's eye, if you will, where in your neighborhood you see the sun rising, where you see the sun setting. Think about that. Okay, you have that picture up here? All right, good. So now, where the sun rises in the morning in your neighborhood, that's the direction east. Got it? Think about what's over there. It's a building or a tree or a house or who knows what. Over there, where the sun is in the morning, that's east. Okay? All right, now let's do the same thing for sunset. Imagine what's over on that side of the sky in your neighborhood at sunset. A particular tree, a building, a house, a park, a playground, a school, whatever it is. That's the direction west. Now you want to identify those objects because if you're outside at night when the sky is dark and you don't have the sun to point the directions, you need something else to help you figure out those directions, right? So that building over in the east, that building's not going anywhere, so you know that's east. Same is true for west. That building over in the west, it's not going anyplace. That's the west for you. Okay, so now here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine that you're standing with east on your left and west on your right. east on your left, west on your right. That means you are now facing south, okay? This is the orientation you should use for observing the night sky to begin with. Why? Because objects will appear to rise in the east, pass overhead in the south, and set in the west, okay? This is also giving you the orientation you need for how to identify planets when they appear in the evening sky. So we're going to start first with Venus and Mars. Venus and Mars right now, let's see, what time is it? It's 10 minutes after 8 over here in Philadelphia. At 10 minutes after 8, it's still light outside. So if we go an hour later, 10 minutes after 9, you're going to be able to observe Venus over on the western side of the sky. Remember that building that's over in the west? Well, Venus is going to be above that building and it's going to appear bright white. If you see an object that gleams with no twinkle, bright white, 10 minutes after 9 tonight, or when the sky gets dark, wherever you live, for you folks out in Sacramento and Illinois, well, guess what? That's going to be Venus, all right? So you need as clear a view of the western sky as you can get. If there are tall buildings in your way, try to position yourself on a street looking west between the buildings. And this way you can get a view of Venus over on the western side of the sky. Now, Mars is not far away from that, but in order for you to get a really good idea of where Mars is, we're going to switch things up here. What's going to happen is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go look at a star map that will help you identify where these locations are. So here I am. I'm sort of sharing my screen. You'll bear with me while I switch around here, and I'm going to come out to one of my favorite star maps that I like to use for observing. It's this one. Hopefully everybody can see this now. It's called Stellarium. This is stellarium-web.org. You can see it up here in my URL search bar, right up here on the top, stellarium-web.org. And I like this one because it's easily accessible, but it's also connected to Stellarium Mobile, as you can see over on the far left of the screen. And Stellarium is a really, really great online program or app you can download for your computer or your smartphone that shows you the night sky really nicely. I'm going to get rid of the bar on the left here and open up the screen fully. And we'll begin just by giving you a little bit of orientation as to where we are. You can see where my cursor is. I'm going to bring it down to the horizon where you can see the letter N for north right down here at the bottom. There it is. That's the letter N for north. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my cursor on my mouse and I'm going to drag the screen around. And I've brought it around just like this so that I'm now looking toward the west. And you can see the letter W at the bottom of the screen there for west. Now in this particular program, you'll note that right here, you can see Venus is highlighted as being behind a tree. Well, that doesn't seem right for the time of evening. So what I need to do is shift the time a little bit to match where we are right now. Here's how I do that. Take my cursor, come down to the lower right corner, click on the gray box, and now I have a device that will allow me to change times. So this time is now listed as 21:56, so that's 9:56, almost 10 p.m. That's too late. So what I've done is I've reduced the time now to 8:56, 20:56. So at 8:56 p.m., and I'm going to close that box now, we can see that Venus is right over here in the lower sky, just above that tree, and it's still a bit bright right now. Sunlight is the problem here, the brightness that I speak of, but just the same, we can see where Venus would appear in the sky. Now, as the sky gets darker, we'll see how Venus begins to appear as it's heading down to set on the western horizon. And what I'm doing is I'm just tapping the sky forward. And I'm going to unpause the time and let it run on its own. And in doing so, this will keep up with actual real time. But you can see I'm ahead of things now by about an hour. And I'm going to continue going just so you can see where Mars is right next to Venus. So right down here, lower portion of the sky, Venus is down behind this tree on my artificial horizon. But Mars is just above Venus and to the left. So when you go out to observe this evening or tomorrow evening or sometime over the holiday weekend, you're looking toward the west, about 10 minutes after 9, with a clear view of the western horizon, brilliant Venus stands there, and then above Venus and just to the left is Mars. Reddish in color should be easy for you to identify as the sky gets dark. Remember, the sky has to be dark enough in order for you to see it. So that's where those planets are in the evening sky at that time. So now, what are the next planets that are visible for us to see at this time of this year? Well, let's just come around the sky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn us around to look at the east. So what I do is I grab and click, and I pull us around, and you can do the same thing, of course, on your computer. Ooh, whoa, 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 whoa. And a little bit too much sky there, so let me see if I can bring things back up here. There we go. Okay. Now we're looking out toward the east. It's still only 9:30 in the evening. The sky's not dark enough yet. So I'm going to take us a little bit later at night. And as we get later at night, you can see the stars begin to show as we're now at 10 o'clock at night, just a little after 10 p.m. Sky looks really great now. Perfect. But I still don't see any planets over there on the eastern horizon. And that's because they haven't come up above the horizon yet. So I'm going to advance a whole hour. Here we go. And now as I've advanced one whole hour to 11 p.m., that's 23 hours in universal or military time, we now can see just to the right of the letter E, the word Jupiter, and then Saturn with the planet above it, or just below the word. So now you can see where Saturn is at 11 p.m. over on the eastern horizon. Now, let's take note of what happens as time advances. I'm going to go to midnight. I'm going to go to 1 o'clock in the morning. And now you can see that they've come up above the horizon pretty well. So right now, what this means is that your best time for viewing these planets is after midnight over on the eastern horizon, or if you're up for it, in the pre-dawn sky just before sunrise. Here we are at about 4:30 in the morning. I'm going to bring the sky around so that we're looking toward the south now. Here we are looking toward the south. And you can see how the planets now are beautifully positioned straight out ahead in the south. And this is in the pre-dawn sky. That may be a little bit early for people to be up at that time of the morning, 4:30. So let's say you're up at maybe 5:30 in the morning. Well, I just switched the time ahead to 5:30, just about 5:30. The sun's about to come up above the horizon. That's a little bit too late to wait. But if you were up at 5 o'clock, turns out that tomorrow, 5 a.m., you can see Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon all up in the sky at the same time, that early in the morning. So if you happen to be an early riser, here's something you can do that will work out for you. But guess what? Most of us aren't up at that time. So let me talk to those folks that really want to be out in the late evening sky observing, say around 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Well, here's a remedy for you. As it turns out, like I said, July is a great month to figure out the flow of things. So here's what we're going to do with this program. What we're going to do is we're going to bring this back to changing the time back to very late night. And I'm going to go for about 10 o'clock. Here we are now. I've adjusted the time to be just after 10 o'clock. We're looking toward the southern sky. I'm going to swing things around so we're looking in the southeast, just about like this. And then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to adjust this day by day. Watch what happens to the rising time of the planets as I adjust day by day. So I've kept the 10 o'clock time, but notice as I go later in the month, the planets are rising earlier and earlier, so that by the middle of the month, a couple of things have happened. By the 20th of the month, Jupiter and Saturn both are above the horizon by 10 p.m. And look, the moon has joined them. So let me jump 1 hour ahead to 11 p.m. This brings the planets up above the horizon a little bit more, makes them easier to see. But you'll notice that on the 22nd, the moon has now joined them. And so if you go out on the evening of the 27th, you'll catch the moon, you'll catch Saturn, you'll catch Jupiter. And if we jump day by day, watch what happens with the moon. The moon slides up to Saturn, slides past Saturn on the 23rd and 24th, and then comes up to match with Jupiter on the 25th of the month. So now what we can see is that we can actually watch when the moon slides past the planets, and we can see when these planets are visible in the evening sky. So now we have two really great options for planetary observing this month. Those two really great options for planetary observing, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here now. These two really great options for planetary observing in July are just after sunset, when Venus and Mars are over on the western side of the sky. And then after sunset, as the sky is darkening towards 10, 11, 12, and 1 o'clock, you can see Jupiter and Saturn. And as we move through the month, those planets become visible earlier and earlier in the evening. Let's extend the pattern just a little bit more, and you can do this mentally without the star map. Very simple. If by July 22nd, the planets are rising at 10 p.m., what time do you think the planets will be rising in August, on August 22nd? If you guessed 9 p.m., you're right. So what happens is, as we move through the summer and into the fall, the planets will be rising an hour earlier each month as time goes by. So now you can realize that we can watch these planets on into the fall and headed on towards winter as they're rising earlier and earlier in the evening. So that's a good way to keep track of the motion of the planets as the year goes on. You can know when and where to look really easily, just as easily as we just saw here right now. Okay, so let's stop and see if we have any questions before we go on to constellations, because they're great stars for us to see in the evening sky as well. Linda, what do we have?
Absolutely. 9-year-old Evan would like to know, can we see Venus from Staten Island, New York?
Was that Evan?
Yeah.
Oh.
9 years old, and when can we see it?
Great. Hey, Evan, thanks for joining us. I understand you're on Staten Island in New York. Glad you could join us tonight. Thanks for being with us. So guess what? Yeah, you can see Venus from Staten Island. Now, I'm going to tell you, Evan, it's going to be a bit of a challenge because it's kind of low on the horizon. So you'll need a good, clear view of the western horizon after sunset. You know, a great way to do this is to find a good vantage point that allows you to see the western horizon, start just after sunset, and then hang around for a couple of hours and watch to see how the sky changes as the sun sets, see what objects appear. And the first object you'll see over in the west, Evan, as the sky is darkening, that's going to be Venus. So that's the trick to finding it. And you know what? Thanks, Evan, because you've led me on to something that I should have mentioned earlier. As you're looking at the sky, Evan, as the sky gets darker, the first objects we will see will be planets, followed by the brightest stars. So if you're out looking toward the west, Evan, after sunset, the first object you'll see will be Venus. The next object you'll see might be Mars, or it might be a brighter star. But you know where Mars is going to be because it's just above Venus and a little bit to the left. So that's a great way for you to see it. No binoculars needed for this, Evan, no telescope necessary, just a good clear view of the western sky. And make sure you're doing this, of course, on a clear night. No clouds. That way you'll be able to see it. Thanks for the question, Evan. Good luck. What's up next?
Katie says the science is awesome. She wants to thank you for teaching everybody.
Hey, Katie, thanks a lot for recognizing the science we're doing here. You know, this is all about connecting to the night sky. What we're talking about, Katie, is stuff that's been done by observers for thousands of years, long before telescopes were available. And, you know, the ancient sky observers could easily predict the motion of planets and visibility of planets across the sky. So it's not as if you can't do this too. It's pretty straightforward. All you need is some regular viewing of the sky, and it works out really well. So just get out every other night or so, spend just a couple of minutes looking at the sky, and you'll begin to recognize the patterns. They'll become familiar to you, just like they were to ancient sky observers. And before you know it, you'll know your way around. Yeah, it's pretty cool too, because once you recognize the patterns, even for you, Evan, it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. You'll still know where you are in the night sky. That's why this is such a great opportunity to understand the flow and the layout of the sky so that you make that connection that lets you recognize things no matter where you look. What else is next, Linda?
Little Julia would like to know how many stars are in Orion's belt.
Ah, hi, little Julia. You'd like to know how many stars there are in Orion's belt. All right, well, let's start first of all with Orion the Constellation. It's actually a winter constellation, so it's left our sky. It'll be back around by next December. We'll be able to catch it again and then watch it for the next 5 or 6 months. But if we look at the bright stars of Orion, there are 7 major bright stars. Those stars mark the shoulders of Orion, left shoulder, right shoulder, a knee and an ankle of Orion. And then the belt stars themselves are 3 stars, 3 main bright stars in the belt. If we think about the constellation as a whole, though, as it turns out, Julia, there are thousands of stars in the constellation Orion, those that we can see, and then those that are so far away or so dim that we can't see them. But because they're within that same area of the sky, we identify them as being stars of Orion. So the 3 bright stars mark the belt of Orion. They are Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka. Those are their names. Alnilam, Alnitak, and Mintaka. Sometimes I joke around and say they are Tom, Dick, and Harry, or Mo, Larry, and Curly. Just a way to remember that they are 3 stars. But those Arabic names are the names that are given to those stars. Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka. Very cool names. You can look them up and find out what they mean, actually, and then I'll tell you some about the history of naming stars. Thanks, Julia. Okay, so on we go, folks. The next thing we want to do is we've talked about planets in the sky, but now the next thing we need to do is we need to think about what constellations are in the sky, because we have a really, really cool set of constellations for the summer. There are 2 sets of constellations for the summer sky that we can take a look at. One of them is a group that's high overhead. Doesn't matter if you're in Sacramento or Illinois, or even in Florida, or if you're up in Maine. These are still the constellations that'll work for you. There's one set that's overhead, as I mentioned, and then there's another set that's down low on the southern horizon. Now, for the group that's down low on the southern horizon, for the folks in Maine and further up into Canada, these are going to be a bit more of a challenge for you because they are so low on the horizon. For those of you that are in Florida enjoying this presentation tonight, well, those constellations will be up higher in the sky for you. So you'll be able to see them a bit easier. For the rest of us in the middle, hey, we're all good. We can see them just fine. All right, so let's start first with a little bit of orientation so that we can get ourselves set up properly. If you're going to go out and look at the night sky, it's good to pick a time to do it when the sky is going to be dark. What I always recommend is you start just before the sky is dark so that you can begin to recognize the brightest stars as they appear. This is particularly important if you're working in an urban area, someplace where you have lots of bright city lights at night, because this way you're picking out the main stars of any constellation. Just think about it. You would expect that if you're in an urban area where there's too much city light, maybe you can't see very much. As it turns out, the urban light becomes a filter. It takes out all of the dimmer stars in the background and gives you just the brightest stars. So that way it's easier to identify the main shape of any constellation. So we have a couple of constellations that this is going to work for really well for us tonight. Right? Okay, so remember that orientation. East on the left, west on the right, you're facing south. If you look about halfway up the sky, this is an area I call the keystone of the sky. I call it the keystone because you can start here as a place, as a jumping off point to go from this location out to areas adjacent, above or below, left or right. And it gives you sort of like an anchor point in the sky, if you will. And so starting from that anchor point, you can find your way around pretty easily. All right, so let's do that. Let's figure it about, since it's summertime, let's go with 10 o'clock at night. Great, okay. We're looking out toward the south at 10 p.m. What do we see if we go out and we look in that particular direction? Well, things seem pretty empty right in there because the stars that are right in that particular location actually are fairly dim. It's a group called Ophiuchus, not as bright as it could be. But we can go from there and find other groups. So let's go with the ones overhead first. We're going to use our star map for this again. So I'm going to share my screen again. I'll come back to this favorite sky viewing tool that I'm using here, Stellarium. We're back here at Stellarium again. I'm going to come back to 10 p.m. You can see right now I'm pointed off toward the east, and I'm at July 25th. I'm going to bring the date down a little bit and just come down to about July, the middle of the month. Here we are. I'll bring this around to observing in the southern portion of the sky right here. And there are a couple of really cool tools I can use here to help me find my way around. So let's cheat and use some of those tools right away. So the first tool I'm going to use, you'll find down here on the toolbar, and it's this one over here called Constellations. I'm going to click on that, and what it's going to do is it's going to show me all the bright star constellations that are out there in the sky. See that? Pretty straightforward, right? What you're seeing are just these geometric patterns. They look like crosses or squares or rectangles or different sorts of shapes. And it's very much like a giant connect the dots game, right? Well, here we are. And as I said, right in the middle of the sky right now is Ophiuchus right here and Serpens, constellations that don't have very many bright stars. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Like I said, we're going to start overhead. We're going to start overhead, but we're going to look a little bit over to our left, okay? Up overhead to our left. We're going to find the brightest star of the summer sky, and it's a star called Vega. You see it on the map here, V-E-G-A. There's Vega right there. Vega is part of a constellation called Lyra. Lyra refers to a harp from Greek mythology, and this constellation itself has stars that are okay in brightness, but Vega itself is really, really, really bright, and so it can act as an anchor point for you up here in this portion of the sky. Here's why. There are two other stars not too far away that will work to help you pull together three constellations in one simple shape. So let's start with Vega. And what I'm going to ask you to do is take a look down a little bit lower in the sky over towards Aquila. Right here, there's a bright star, and this star is named Altair. Altair. So we have two stars. We can connect these dots with a line. And so we have a line between Vega and Altair. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight upward toward the top of the sky from Altair, and I'm going to come to this star in Cygnus right here, and this star is called Deneb, D-E-N-E-B. So I'm going to put a line between Altair and Deneb. So if I put a line between Altair and Deneb, I have a line between Altair and Vega. Let's do the very last thing and put a line between between Deneb and Vega. Now we have a geometric shape that we would call what? A geometric shape with three sides and 3 points. A triangle. That's it. So this is the summer triangle. These three stars are the three brightest stars in the summer sky, and so together they make up the summer triangle. Now, in an urban area, it may be more difficult for you to pick up all of the stars of Aquila the Eagle or even the stars of Cygnus. But guess what? Those three stars will stand out. So if you can find those three together, you can make the summer triangle, you can make those three constellations. It's that simple. That's all you have to do. The star map, of course, will help. Now, here's the cool background on these stars. The cool background is that of these three stars, you might think that the biggest one, Vega, is the one that's closest to us because it's so big. Right, sure, that makes sense. Guess what? It's not always that simple in astronomy. As it turns out, it's Altair that is closest to us in terms of distance around the sky. Altair is just 16 light years away. 16 light years away. Vega, on the other hand, guess what? Is 26 light years away. So 10 light years further out. All right, last but not least, let's go up to Deneb here. Now, when you see Deneb in the sky, it's going to appear to be very similar in brightness to Altair and to Vega. So you would think, oh, it must be, say, maybe 30 light years away or so. Nope, sorry, 1,600 light years away. Wow. Yes, Deneb is 1,600 light years away. You know what that means? If we could bring Deneb as close as Vega and Altair are, that means that Deneb would almost take up the entire night sky. That's how big it would be. It's enormous and also quite bright. Doesn't look so bright because it's so much farther away. But if we bring it in a lot closer, it would outshine everything else in the sky, hands down. So when you go outside in the evening and you look for these three stars, now think of it this way. Altair is close, Vega's a little bit further away, but Deneb is really way out there. So now this gives you more of a three-dimensional view of the sky because they're not all there together at the same plane, but there are enormous gulfs of distance between them. So that's a way to think of those three. So that's the summer triangle. It includes Cygnus, Lyra, Aquila the Eagle, the bright stars Vega, Deneb, and Altair. So those three go together. Now here's a cool thing about Cygnus that's fun. If you want to take a look at this with a pair of binoculars, this will be a big help. So you see where Deneb is up at the top here. If we come down along the long bar of Cygnus down to this star at the bottom, that star down there is called Albirio. And Albirio is a pretty cool star. And the reason why it's a pretty cool star, I'm going to zoom in on it just so you can see a little bit about its nature. I'm getting a little bit closer to Albirio. And as it turns out, Albirio is really a double star. It's two stars. If we get close enough to them with a pair of binoculars or a telescope, we can see a very interesting thing about these two stars. One star is gold, the other star is blue. One star is gold, the other star is blue. So those of you that received a telescope as a holiday gift, guess what? Here's a perfect target so you can see something really cool. A blue star right next to a gold star. The colors, of course, tell us something about the temperature. I'll let you figure out what that is. We've talked about that before in the past, and you can do a little research on your own and figure out what the temperature, what about the temperature comes from the color. Okay, so something for you to take a look at with your telescope. Now, another thing I'll mention about looking with your telescope is this. First of all, let me rotate my sky back around again. There we go. We'll go a little bit further out. There we are. And it's this. One of the most beautiful stars I've seen in the sky in a telescope is Vega. Of all the stars I've looked at in a telescope, Vega is the only one that looks like a diamond. Far more so than any other bright white star, this one really looks like a diamond. Take a look for yourself with your telescope, then compare to other stars and tell me what you think. I think you'll find it looks that way too, like a diamond. Okay, now let's go back to Cygnus for just a second. We talked about those two stars along the long bar. Well, that long bar defines the path of the Milky Way across the sky. So if you're heading out away from the city for summer vacation, if you're going out to a camp someplace, going to visit relatives someplace where the sky is darker, well, guess what? This is a great opportunity for you to see the edge of our Milky Way, of our galaxy. So this stripe across the sky of faint illumination, sort of like a faint glow across the sky that runs along the axis of Cygnus, you're actually seeing the arms of our galaxy, the Milky Way, right out there running along the sky. This is a great target for a pair of binoculars. Just sweep the binoculars along the sky where you'll see lots and lots of bright stars, or I should say, not necessarily bright stars, but you'll be able to see the soft glow that comes from the millions, the billions of stars that make up the stars in our galaxy. So now what we're going to do is we're going to follow that line and we're going to come right down along the axis of Cygnus, past Aquila. We're going to end up down toward the south where there are two constellations that are two main constellations of the summer sky. And those two constellations are the constellations Sagittarius and Scorpius. These two are constellations that are part of the zodiac group of constellations, Sagittarius and Scorpius, but they also have really cool features about them that are great to look at. First of all is their shape. So Scorpius actually does look like the shape of a scorpion. Now, in this program, we have a great way to illustrate that. We'll use one of the other tools of the program. We'll go down to the toolbar and we'll use the constellation art. And we'll see that now we can see what the artwork is of these constellations, how ancient sky observers imagined these stars were in the sky. And you can see, looking right behind Scorpius, the scorpion, the lines here, you can see the outline of the scorpion without much difficulty at all. And if I enhance the view, now you can see it even better. So Scorpius is a really cool constellation because it has this very bright reddish star called Antares. Antares, beautiful red color, great to see, really worth taking a look at. And the scorpion shape with all of these bright stars is really cool to see as well. So that constellation will identify for you the western side of the Milky Way. Let's go back over to the eastern side of the Milky Way, just behind Scorpius, where Sagittarius is. And here in Sagittarius, you can see what looks like this shape of stars right here is actually outlined as a very odd creature. Now, if you're familiar with the Harry Potter series, you might recognize that creature as a centaur, half person, half horse. In this case, the centaur has a bow and arrow that it seems to be shooting across towards the scorpion. Well, thank goodness they're fixed in the sky forever in these positions, and that arrow will never actually hit the scorpion. But you can see where Sagittarius is right there on the western side of the Milky Way. Well, in this group, right in here of these stars, right at the top star, at the top of what looks like a teapot shape right here, right up here at the very top, there's a very cool star cluster that you can see with a pair of binoculars as well. So you can look for that. Now remember, this star map you can use to help you find all of these objects if you just use the tools. I've used the zoom to zoom into this so I can find out where these star clusters are, and I can see that there are other objects in these other constellations nearby that I can look for with my binoculars or with a telescope. And this is just a way for you to get started. There are lots of other resources online for you that you can use to help find your way around the evening sky, but this is just to get you started. Now, if you use this method to get started, guess what? You can find these constellations without any difficulty at all, and you can find your way along from constellation to constellation. Here's the last one I'll mention. That's actually, there are two I'll mention here that are near the top of the sky at that Keystone point that I mentioned, halfway up at about 10 p.m. Let's go right in here to Hercules, which is right in the middle of the sky above Ophiuchus. Hercules stars are not very bright, but if you can identify the location between Vega here and Arcturus over here in Boötes on the west, you can find Hercules right in between these two. Here's what you're going to look for. I'm zooming in because there's a really, really cool cluster of stars for you to see right here called M13. This cluster is called a globular cluster. There are hundreds of thousands of stars in this cluster, all held together by mutual gravity. And with your telescope, you can see that without much difficulty at all. Your skies, you'll need a little bit darker skies to see this, but it's a really cool feature to see. And clusters like this are some of the earliest members of our galaxy. And clusters like this are spread around the sky, but this is one that's relatively easy to see and easy to find because it's just halfway down the western side of Hercules between the star at the top corner here and the star at the lower corner here. Very simple directions. And with a map like this, you can locate it without much difficulty at all. So I'm going to bring us back to where we need to be in the sky. There we are. And next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop our screen share, and I'm going to ask if there are any questions now about what we've done so far. Okay. Oh, unfortunately, we've lost the link and we don't have any questions. So if you do have questions, please put them into our comments and we'll see if we can get to them later. Okay, great. So finally this evening, as we finish out the program this evening, these are great opportunities for folks that are on vacation to get a look at the evening sky. So if you're going to be away on vacation, don't forget to take your binoculars with you. Even though you might not be able to take your telescope with you, you can certainly take your binoculars with you, and they will help you find your way around the sky using maps like this to see. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is of things that are available to see in the evening sky that you should be looking for are satellites. Now, I've talked about satellites before as being easy objects that you can pick up without much difficulty. And here's the one map that I like to use. And, you know, I actually go back and forth between the different maps that I like to use for finding constellations in the evening sky or finding satellites in the evening sky. So first things first, I'm,
Back.
I'm sorry. Ah, it's back. Oh, our questions link is back. Thank you very much. Please send those questions in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skip from Stellarium web here, and I'm going to switch over to this website, jamesdarpinian.com, james.darpinian.com. You don't have to use that URL. You can just search for See a Satellite Tonight. If you search for See a Satellite Tonight, it will bring you to this particular web application. This is a really cool one because what it does is it lets you know what satellites are going to be available to be seen in the sky in your neighborhood tonight. So here's the way it's laid out. On the very far left side, you'll see a stack of gray squares. The numbers in each one of those squares are times that indicate when some satellite is going to be visible. The next box over to the right is looking down on Earth from space to show where you're located and where a satellite is passing adjacent to your location on Earth. And then finally, the screen all the way to the right, that section all the way to the right, shows you the sky above where you live so that you can go out and figure out how to see these satellites around your sky. So now for where I am, I have things set up for me. You can see where I am here at U over here in Philadelphia. And this is actually my street over here because this actually uses Google Street View to show where satellites are visible in the evening sky. So here's what's happening right now in this particular one. Here's a Starling satellite that's available for view in the evening sky tonight at 9:13 p.m. Here's where it is, zipping across the sky. This is not my house, but in my neighborhood, I can go out and find this house and then go look for where the satellite is relative to that house, and I can see it. Now, what of course I can do is I can select different times for viewing in the evening. I've moved down to almost 11 p.m. Here's another satellite. I'm going to go to just after 11 when I have what looks like H2ARB. R/B, by the way, means rocket booster. So this is a rocket booster that I can see flying across the sky. If I want to be up early, I can see International Space Station down low on the horizon in my neighborhood over here. But at least it shows me where to look relative to objects in my neighborhood. So for your neighborhood, it would work the same way. So this is a really cool one to use no matter where you are. And if you just continue scrolling down on the far left, you can go all the way out a couple of days. I'm going to go to 2:13 in the morning on Sunday morning when International Space Station is making a very bright pass over where I live in this portion of the country. So you can use this and it'll work out really well for you. Okay, so as I said, this is a perfect opportunity for you to get out and recognize any of these objects in the evening sky. Because we have these long evenings, if we're out enjoying perhaps, say, a picnic or something like that, or a barbecue, this gives you a really, really cool activity to do with the rest of your family. And in fact, of course, you can share these observations with your family. You can share the activity of observing the sky with your family, because while you're doing this observation in one part of the country, another part of your family in another part of the country could be doing the same thing. But if you're out away from urban lights, out on vacation, say you're visiting the New Jersey shore, or you're visiting the mountains, or you're camping someplace, this is a perfect opportunity to experience the sky because you can take time to see how things flow. And this is one of the things I was mentioning earlier. It's a great time to get into the flow of how the sky works. And that's the beauty of being able to just sit and watch the sky as it transitions from daytime to night. As you're seeing what's happening, of course, what will take place as the sky darkens, the brightest objects will appear first. That, of course, refers to planets, then the bright stars, and then as the sky darkens, you'll be able to see the dimmer objects of the sky, particularly the Milky Way. As we pointed out where that is, you know where to look for that in the evening, and the constellations that are adjacent to that will help you orient yourself to where you are looking at the sky. And then as we wait later in the sky, over on the eastern side, towards midnight, we'll see Jupiter and Saturn beginning to make their way up above the horizon. So now you have the complete panoply laid out for you for what's happening this month. Now, let's remember that if we go later in the month, one of the coolest things you'll be able to see is how the moon slides by Saturn, then Jupiter by the 23rd, the 24th, and 25th of July. Now, that's in the evening, of course, and if you just catch the moon as it's rising in the evening, you'll be able to see how it slides past these three planets. That's a great way to see how the moon's orbit actually moves the moon, how the moon moves along its orbit day by day. If you watch first on the 23rd, then the 24th, then the 25th, you can see actually how much the moon covers in its orbit each day. So that's a really cool thing to do. But if you happen to be up in the pre-dawn sky, for the pre-dawn sky, you'll be able to see it then too on those same days, and it'll look really cool. Let's just check and see if we have any questions.
Evan has two questions. He would like to know how much energy is released when two galaxies collide, and how much is 1 light year in miles?
Wow, Evan has two really cool questions. One of them I can answer, the other one I can't. Let's start with the one I can't answer first, and that is, how much energy is given off when two galaxies collide in space? Wow, where'd you get that from, Evan? I would love to be able to give you some sort of definitive number, but I can't. Why? Because the amount is way too high. But let's do it this way. When two galaxies collide, to a great degree, what often happens is that the galaxy structure itself passes right past each other between the two galaxies, because galaxies are so big and so much of galaxies are just empty space that you don't really have much in the way of collision, so to speak, like stars crashing into each other. Not a lot of that is happening. But what is happening is that the shock waves of these two galaxies coming to within close proximity of each other causes these two galaxies to change their shape and morph into other shapes. But those shock waves also cause or trigger new stars to be born. So that's a cool thing. So there's a lot of energy that's happening there. But if we want to talk about distance, wow, let's see. You know, you can actually figure this out for yourself. But to do this in miles, what you have to do is you have to just sort of multiply out the numbers that would bring you to the distance. I'll give you the shortcut for you, and then you can go back and figure it yourself. But it's almost 6 trillion miles per light year. 6 trillion miles per light year. Let me see, that's million, billion, trillion. So it's 6,000 billion miles, or 6 trillion miles. So if you're thinking about that distance out to the star Deneb, by the way, that's 1,600 light years out. If you want to know how many miles it is, it's very simple, Evan. Just multiply 6 trillion times 1,600, and that'll give you the number of miles. And no, I will not be doing that multiplication for you, Evan. You'll have to do it on your own. Let me know what you get for an answer. I promise it'll be a big number. Thanks, Evan. Other questions?
Tracy says, we appreciate you so much.
Hey, Tracy, thanks a lot. I'm so glad you could be here. I'm happy to share this information. I share this because I want people to go out and enjoy the night sky the way I enjoy the night sky, or to some degree of how I enjoy the night sky. This is not for people to become astronomers. This is for people to go outside and connect with the night sky and enjoy what's there to be seen. So I hope this is useful and helpful for you to go out and enjoy what's out there to be seen. Okay, folks, so we're coming around to the end of our program here. I want to thank you very much for being with us. Let me just remind you that two things. We talked a little bit about satellites. There aren't really very many viewings of space station right now. As it turns out, space station is in the last of its series of pre-dawn sky visibility, and it's actually, you know, only available for short periods of time. So that's kind of a challenge. The Chinese space station, Tianhe-1, is actually visible in the evening sky, but it's quite faint. And hopefully, as the visibility becomes greater, we'll be able to follow that and see that. Which brings me to this interesting fact about this. You know, if you go out and take a look for space station or the Chinese space station, guess what? There are now 10 people living and working in space. 10 people living and working in space. And it goes like that, like this. There are 2 Russian astronauts, 3 American astronauts, 1 French astronaut, and 1 Japanese astronaut on board International Space Station right now. 3 of those folks have been there for 3 months. 3 of those folks have been there for 6 months. For the Japanese astronauts, I'm sorry, for the Chinese astronauts that are aboard the Chinese space station, they've been there for just a couple of weeks. So there are 10 people now living and working in space. That's our reality these days, folks. I don't think there's ever going to be a time in the future when there aren't people living and working in space. So if you're out there taking a look and you happen to come across and can actually catch one of the views of space station or the Chinese space station, wave at them as they go by. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. So let me just mention that the Franklin Institute is now open. So come visit us. We are excited to offer not only our iconic exhibits of the giant walk through heart or the brain exhibit or the train factory or our sport exhibit, even the Fels Planetarium. Yes, come see those. Oh, don't forget our live science, our daily live science demonstrations are also happening right now. But we're also hosting for unlimited engagement, a now next pop-up exhibit called Jellyfish Revealed. Yes, we have an exhibit that's starting on July 3rd, just a couple of days, called Jellyfish Revealed. If you like jellyfish, come down and check out this pop-up exhibit that we're going to have for a limited period of time about jellyfish. We are even going to have a display of live jellyfish. And here's a question for you. What would you think are my favorite jellyfish? Think about it for a second. You know what it would be? Of course, moon jellyfish. Sure, those would be my favorite ones. And those are the jellyfish we're going to have on display, moon jellyfish. So the exhibit opens on Saturday. It's a really cool experience. And that experience, of course, is included with the museum admission. So when you come down to check out the museum this weekend or this month, you'll have this great opportunity to check out Jellyfish Reveal. So come down and check that out. And the museum is open. We'd love to have you come visit us. So remember, it takes just a few minutes every night to go out and take a look at the evening sky and familiarize yourself with what's there. I want to thank everybody for your great questions. If you have additional questions, don't forget to drop those questions into our comments box and I'll get to those questions. You can also check me out at Twitter. My handle is @CoolAstronomer. You'll find me there. You can also find me there for daily updates. And just a little hint about something that's coming in the not too distant future at Franklin Institute, an exclusive first time premiere exhibit, the Harry Potter Experience. Yes, coming to Franklin later this year, the Harry Potter Experience. Stay tuned for more about this. You can find out more on our website. You can log in there where you can put your name on a list to be among the very first to find out the details about when the exhibit is going to open and when tickets are available. You know this is going to be really popular, so you should do your best to get your tickets early. The Harry Potter Experience coming to the Franklin Institute as a premiere exhibit, not seen anywhere else before it has come to the Franklin Institute. So a lot to be seen at Franklin this year. We hope you'll start out with Jellyfish Revealed. And as we get back to doing more programming at the Franklin Institute, I'll tell you more about night skies at the observatory as it's coming. So enjoy the month of July, folks. Get out and enjoy the night sky. Don't forget to catch the moon as it slides by Saturn and Jupiter later on in the month. And those constellations I mentioned, all easy for you to see. No major meteor showers this month. That's next month when I'll have on board a guest who's an engineer out at Mauna Kea Observatories in Hawaii. We'll talk about what's going on out there. We'll talk about the meteor showers and all kinds of other great things happening in the skies. Thanks for joining us. Glad you could be with us. I'm Derrick Pitts, Chief Astronomer at the Franklin Institute Science Museum. You're a cool astronomer. Follow me on Twitter. We'll see you again next month. Stay safe and enjoy the night skies. So long, folks.